Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Buck Brief. On this episode, Matthew Tyrmand is with us, investigative journalist, a man who knows many things about many people and places all over the world. He was just in Ramallah, place I haven't been to in a while, but I have been, and I'm sure it is every bit as lovely as when I was there. Tell me about your trip into the West Bank, Mr. Tyrmand, and what you learned, what you saw, what's going on.
Well, Ramallah is just the money laundering capital of the world. I don't know how long ago you were there, but I gotta say it's kind of nice. Maseratis, not rickshaws, Range Rovers, Mercedes, BMWs, Jeeps with American flags on them. Believe it or not, I mean, lots of Western goods and accoutrement. I mean, that place is loaded. It was a little bit shocking to the degree that it was so
I can tell you this.
thriving.
I was there almost 20 years ago, and it was not like that. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that tells you a lot. I mean, I know that, I was there during these hostilities. I went in on a Polish passport since, American relations are not so good. I did not, telegraph that I'm a American Jew from New York, even though, I don't know, look at me, they might have figured that out. I ended up talking to some guys from Chicago and New York. But I mean, that place is loaded now. 20 years of money laundering since you were last there between U.S. taxpayers, EU taxpayers, the United Nations being the vehicle through which those laundered funds enter Ramallah, American school, UNRWA schools. The place was over the top. People were pretty friendly. It's not Gaza. The hostilities were not, of the same sort. They certainly refer to Israel as an occupying force, and they do hate Israel. And even going to Yasser Arafat's tomb, they said that it's removable so that when they take back Jerusalem, they can remove Arafat's tomb from Ramallah and put it in Jerusalem as per his dying wish. So it's the place is very, very odd. It's a study in contrast, the contrast of what the mainstream media conception of the West Bank is versus what it's like on the ground. Gleaming new malls, Palestinian Development Bank with top quality building materials for its 15-story skyscrapers. Food was quite good. It was interesting. I was there with Visegrad 24, a group I do work with based in Europe, who's been covering the ongoing conflict in the Middle East quite tightly on social media. So we were interviewing people over there, and it was interesting.
So what do
We'll
they
have a
what do
lot.
they think the Ramallahans? I don't know what you call them, but Ramallahans, and the people of the West Bank, are they basically of the mind that Israel's going to do what it does in Gaza and business is going to continue over here? What are they saying?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think they think that Israel's going to be coming in anytime soon and leveling it the way they are with Gaza. And even though they are supportive of these terrorist cells, whether it's in the north at Hezbollah or Hamas in Gaza, they don't seem as proactively involved. They like their gravy train of UN money laundering and UNRWA schools. And, it was funny. We're going to the main mosque, the Abdel Nasser Mosque, and we were at this, the equivalent of what you'd have in New York, a bodega, a little shop with, low-level food and sundries. And you had Logan or Jake Paul's new drink, Prime, selling there, which you can't even get in some cities in the U.S. because it's so sold out. And so there's a weird level of westernization there. The brand and license logoing, copying that goes on. There are American food operators there, like Pizza Hut, KFC. One of our guides suggested KFC stands for Kentucky Fried Camel, but that was a licensed, actual American enterprise there. Popeyes, Louisiana Kitchen was there. A lot
When
of
I was there,
bootleg
there was a Starbucks ripoff that wasn't spelled Starbucks. Is that still
Stars
there?
and Bucks.
Stars and
Dude,
Bucks.
that's
Yes.
literally the main landmark of Ramallah that everybody in the Middle East knows. Hey, you go to Ramallah. Have you been to Stars and Bucks? So the story there is the guy lifted Starbucks' logo just straight off about 25, 30 years ago. And Starbucks came after him for license and trademark infringement. And so he just kind of tweaked it a little. So it still looks like the green circle, but it's now entitled Stars and Bucks. And it's a coffee shop and a shisha lounge. So we smoked some shisha in Stars and Bucks. And that's overlooking the main square. There are two little squares that are connected by one of the main thoroughfares. That looks like the old prototypical, stereotypical Middle East, very thin road, congested, small shops. And there's, the main square that Stars and Bucks is over, and then the square a block away, where there's the monument to the martyrs. So, old habits do die hard. They love the money laundering, but the rhetoric and invective is still quite aligned with the jihadist mentality that West Bank and Palestinian affairs were built on.
Do you have any sense as to what the belief over there is, not so much in the West Bank, more on the Israel side of things, but the future of Netanyahu in all of this. People have been asking me, and I always tell them, I'm like, if you think American politics are opaque and overly complicated, go check out what's going on over in Israel with the Knesset and all the rest of it. What do you have any take on that? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, parliamentary systems are by their nature much sloppier because you need coalitions. You're very fragmented, many parties across the entire spectrum of far right to far left with everything in between. And so Netanyahu, I think it was like 4 or 5 elections they had to hold with fractured coalitions to rebuild a government that had some level of stability. After October 7th, his popularity is way down. That being said, as long as they're at war, there will not be a snap election. They are unified behind essentially the military force and the military management as it stands, which has many political appointees. So there will not be, the political strife we saw last year with judicial reform rearing its head again and catalyzing snap elections. Netanyahu is probably done. His career is probably done, and we've said that many times in the past. But here, there is a lot of antipathy after what happened October 7th, and certainly there are a lot of people who feel that he had some blame in terms of being asleep at the wheel because they were so distracted with domestic politics. They forgot that their number one predicate as, leaders of this country more than any other is security and stabilizing the security, the defensive capabilities, and there was a failure. That being said, as long as they're at war and it's hot and kinetic and in the north and in the south with Gaza, probably won't be any snap elections. So some are arguing and rumor mongering that he has an incentive to keep the war going because as a result he will stay in power. I think that's a little overly cynical, and I'm quite cynical, but I think that's a little overly cynical. Everyone in Israel is shaken up by what happened and wants to end Hamas and restabilize the north where Hezbollah is continuing to be a kinetic threat.
Let's talk about what just happened with the election in El Salvador, a country that people in the West really know about because it used to be the murder capital of the world per capita, at least close to it. Number one, number two.
Honduras.
Well, it was El Salvador was right there. I think it was
right
number
there.
2. Yeah, but
number 2.
Yeah, okay. As I said, number 1 and number 2 was one of the highest murder places in the entire.
Honduras was like I remember I had friends from Honduras, from San Pedro Sula, which is the second city in Honduras, and that place like laps everywhere else. It's like in Detroit, it's like 4 out of 100,000 get murdered. In San Pedro Sula, it's like 300 out of 100,000.
Yeah, I mean the numbers are staggering. But in El Salvador, that has completely turned around, and there's probably a lesson for it. So we're gonna talk about that election and Bukele, the president, once again here. But first up, a word from Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Born from a tragedy of 9/11, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation made a promise to ensure we never forget. Since then, it's been committed to supporting America's heroes and their families. Heroes like U.S. Army Specialist Michael Hook, who was killed in Iraq when his helicopter was shot down. He had enlisted in the military after graduating high school. He left behind a pregnant fiancée who gave birth to a son he would never meet. Thanks to the generosity of friends like you, Tunnel to Towers paid off the mortgage on his family's home, relieving a financial burden and bringing stability. The foundation helps Gold Star and fallen first responder families, as well as our nation's most severely injured heroes and homeless veterans. Join Tunnel to Towers on its mission to do good. America's heroes are counting on you. 95 cents of every dollar you give goes directly to its programs. Go to T2T.org. That's T2T.org. Please donate today. I donate every month. And so many others out there do as well. Thank you for being here again, Matt Tyrmand, investigative journalist. Bukele wins bigly in El Salvador. What happened? Why does it matter?
Apparently, much like, and we'll talk about Argentina with inflation, but, when you have a massive crime problem, the guy who actually says and then does deliver on cleaning up crime gets a big mandate. I think this has got to be the biggest mandate in any democratic systemic election ever, 85% or something of the popular vote, 58 out of 60 seats in the National Assembly, which is like 96% or so of the seats in parliament are now, Bukele's party, which has been built around him. Of course, you have to worry about cult of personality. You have to worry about dictatorial power creeping in. But so far, all of the Western media sphere lies or smears that, he's a dictator, the cool dictator, they call him. Well, are you a dictator if the people vote for you overwhelmingly? We've had the debate about Viktor Orban as well. He keeps winning these mandates and the West says, oh, he's a dictator or he's an autocrat or a fascist. Well, Bukele has done something really pretty revolutionary in this hemisphere, especially south of our border and looking southwards. These are very dangerous areas, as we're talking about. Massive, massive cartel activity, kidnapping and ransoming, mass murder over the slightest trifling things. But again, the drug trade is the main reason, human migration as well, human trafficking. And he has cleaned up that area. I mean, we have these gangs in New York like MS-13 that hearken from these regions in Central America. And we can't clean up Long Island from these drug gangs, but he's cleaned up his country very quickly within one term. And so he's gotten a second term. And so they'll, say he's a dictator, but again, largest mandate, popular mandate, maybe in history by percentage of any country in the world. What he's doing, you're right, is instructive. Apparently, when you have high crime, tough on crime does pay. Just like Milei getting elected in Argentina over economic issues.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Milei. You were down there, right, in Argentina. We'll get into that.
I was there for the inauguration, yeah.
Yeah. What is Latin America? Why can't they figure this out? Honest, on crime and on economics, specifically inflation. What do they not get? I mean, the regimes that run these countries, and just across the board, almost a few exceptions. El Salvador, we're talking about one, and the new leadership in Argentina. But Latin America is poorly led right now, right? Whether you're talking about Mexico or Venezuela or Brazil or what's going, what do they have to figure out here?
Communists. And we've talked about this in the past, and I did a lot on this during the Brazilian election. There was a group, an entity called the Forum Sao Paulo that was chartered around 1991 by Fidel Castro and Lula da Silva, the current, again, president of Brazil, let out of prison to run. Election was brazenly stolen. There's more than enough evidence out there. And the Forum Sao Paulo was created to fill the gap when the Soviet Union went bust, because that was all the money that was coming into the hemisphere of these third world nations, just like in Africa, just like in the Middle East, in incubating the PLO and other of the jihadist separatist movements. In South America, it was the Forum Sao Paulo, and they filled the gap from the Soviet Union with Castro and Chavez running it out of Cuba. And that's how they took over Venezuela. That's how they took over Nicaragua. That's how they took over Bolivia, Brazil, more recently Colombia and Chile. Colombia and Chile were kind of righty conservative nations. Colombia was run for many years by, what we would call Republicans, if you had to break it down to that dichotomy that we understand. And now you have Petro, who was a Marxist narco-trafficante, a guerrilla in the forests. So he's a full-on communist. Boric in Chile was the head of the Marxist Students League, a student activist, not too different than Brandon Marshall and Brandon Johnson in Chicago, the teachers union hack. I mean, someone who's never run anything, but all of a sudden ends up as president of a nation that, again, was relatively conservative, economically was very classically liberal. You had the Chicago boys deregulating the economy and Chile's great success. Argentina has been run by the Peronists, the Juan Perón, Evita, Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, that lady, played by Madonna in 1990s. They have been run by the Peronist regime and its predecessors, also incubated by the Forum Sao Paulo, Cristina Kirchner, her husband Nestor Kirchner, Fernandez. And now Argentinians finally said, after this crippling hyperinflation over the last 10 years, I mean, really, the highest level of inflation in the country, every day prices doubling sort of thing, the stuff that you read about in Zimbabwe, the Weimar Republic. And this was a country that 100 years ago was third wealthiest in the world after the US and the UK. So Milei got an overwhelming mandate. The Marxists got sent packing. The reason Argentina was able to do it was quite simple. They maintained paper ballots. Paper ballots are an integral part of the electoral process. In Brazil, they got rid of paper ballots. There was no audible ballot scheme. It was all digital. And so, they did what they did.
Cheat in Brazil? Did the communists cheat in Brazil?
Oh, yeah. And, you and I talked about it. I covered it in depth a year and a half ago. It was brazen what they did. Now they stripped Bolsonaro of his right to run again. The Supreme Court, this was the Supreme Court that detained myself and a traveling party that included Jason Miller when we met with Bolsonaro like 3 years ago. They detained us at the airport and wanted to know everyone we met with. So it was like full Stasi tactics. And the Supreme Court has their own law enforcement wing, and they let Lula out of prison. They overturned all his multiplicity of convictions. I mean, the guy should have been in jail for the rest of his life and then some. I mean, they let out people in Lula's party that were sentenced to 400 years for criminal corruption. So It's gross what's going on there. Brazil is probably lost for the foreseeable future, much like I view Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But Argentina all of a sudden is like this bulwark now and the shining light. Malay's going to do a lot of big things. He's got the mandate.
Let me bring it home to, because you mentioned that. I'm gonna make you go a little deeper into it. Pennsylvania, unless you were totally kidding. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin.
No.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about why you think there's real challenges there. First up, there's not a day that goes by without someone speculating about how artificial intelligence is going to change the world. Well, here's something. It could really change your portfolio. The impact of AI is going to be massive. And tech expert Colin Tedards believes this is the beginning of a new era that could make you rich. Colin has been watching the markets with rapt attention. When the stock market hit rock bottom at the end of 2022, he recommended shares of a top software company, speculating that the upside of that company was there. This same top software company is up over 200% since then, and anyone who listened to Colin had a chance to more than double their money in less than a year. Now he's recommending a new AI company he says could do even better. He's found a way for you to profit from this as well. Go to newaiproject.com to learn more. That's newaiproject.com, newaiproject.com, paid for by Brownstone Research. Okay, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, you say we got big problems there. I have friends who are tied into politics in Pennsylvania very intimately, and they tell me similar things, and it has to do with just the party infrastructure, voter registration advantage, early voting campaigns, etc. Is that part of your concern there? And tell me about the other states.
Yeah, well, I think in those three states in particular, these were, the purple swing states, and then 2020 happened, and they were very, very successful in taking control. In Democrat, like Wisconsin, the last bastion was the state Supreme Court. That went Democrat with Janet Protasiewicz. Pennsylvania, Dem governor, Dem legislature, Dem state Supreme Court. The same way that they approved, whether you believe that there was ballot stuffing or is more derivative effect of voter fraud, whether it's the media obfuscation or the ballots during COVID going to every household and the late tabulation thereof that was allowable because the state legislature said, okay, we're just going to do it. The Supreme Courts in the state said, we're just going to allow it. And they violated the separation of powers. Well, you know what? The Dems now control those three states in all of their facets politically. And even if the people want to move to the populist and conservative right, good luck. Good luck. And I think, Arizona and Georgia, which were hard red states, are now purple. And part of it was, the bankruptcy of the RNC and the candidates that Trump endorsed and brought forward. I mean, these were candidates that would never, ever win. Mastriano, Oz, Herschel Walker, Carrie Lake. You need to pick up independents if you're going to win these purple swing states. And because these states in the Northern Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, have incredible union faithful, union rank and file, it makes up such a percentage. They're well organized. The union states organize their union rank and file real well for elections. Michigan being the greatest example with Big Auto there for 100 years. Now, there has been a peel-off of the union support because of right to work in other states, because Trump and Bannon with economic nationalism did drive a lot of FDR union Dems to the right in the pro-Trump camp. They're not the party of Elizabeth Warren and Gavin Newsom and wokeism. But that being said, again, if the people there, if you have the margin is, 5 or 10% that swings it to the right, the union organizing, the democratic policy making that will go on in those states will make them untouchable for the next generation. We will not be winning those states. And now I'm fearful that Arizona and Georgia are getting more like those three swing states than Ohio and Florida, which have been made more red.
Matt, where can people go to follow your work?
Twitter, Instagram, social media. It's very ad hoc. Buck Sexton was the Buck Brief.
Yeah, the Buck Brief.
There
you go.
Your apartment when you're hosting.
Yeah,
so
that's right. There you go.
Anywhere.
That's a good point. It sounds like I'm doing an underwear line, but actually it's hard-hitting interviews and other things like that.
Actually sound like.
I agree. Check out my friend Matt Tyrmand. Always insightful, sir. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
See you soon, brother.